As always, the Gurdjieff work, or the hard way, is very practical. So it's important that we can exercise and put ourselves into the right state in order to engage a little bit more appropriately. So I'd like to introduce the preparation exercise, or at least a part of it. It is an exercise to help us put us in that state and to have a bit more of an alert attention. So, to begin, if we can find a comfortable posture in our seat, depending on how you're sitting, generally I'm sitting very firmly in the seat, my feet are out in front of me and hopefully flat on the ground. My spine is as vertical and as upright as I can make it. So already I'm engaging my attention, and we'll talk about that much more. I'm now beginning to be a bit more attentive to the body. So I'm trying to find this supportive posture to allow the body to help me have a more available attention. So I might need to do little adjustments over the feet here, or your bum a little bit more in the seat, or my spine a bit more vertical, my neck a bit more aligned, my head where it needs to be. But I'm just trying to begin to sense all of these little tensions, as well as all of the softnesses, parts where I'm relaxed. And already, by just attempting this, I'm beginning to feel a little different. Something begins to let go. So at every step of the way, this softening, this relaxing yet being alert. I don't want to drift into sleep or dreams, but inevitably that's going to happen. I just see if I can find this supportive posture. So what I'm trying is to make the body passive initially, and then trying to activate my attention. So once I've found this supportive posture, I now just begin to recognize that I need to mobilize something in me, my attention, and really only my attention. Trying to keep the body soft, and I now try to pay attention to the top of my head. I'm trying to sense the skin at the top of the head. I'm trying to have a very tangible sense of the skin, muscles, Could even be a tingling or a warmth sensation. But I'm trying to just directly connect to the top of the head. My mind will wander. That's okay. The exercise is to return to my body. I then try to bring my attention down into the sides of the head. Again, trying to sense the skin, any sensations which may be present. If I can't connect with the sensations, that is okay. I just try. And now try to sense the back of the head, the skin, the muscles. And now the forehead, trying to sense the skin, staying with it. If there's tensions, if I'm scowling, that's okay. I just let that go and I just try to connect. Trying to feel my forehead. And I move my attention into the eyes. Can I sense the sensations around the eyes? Are my eyes tense, tight? Am I closing my eyes too hard? Can I just soften them? Sense the skin. Then I move to my nose, trying to sense the skin all around the nose. The nostrils, trying to sense inside of the nostrils. Every breath, can I sense the air movement in and out? I now try to sense my lips, the top lip, the bottom lip. I try to sense the inside of my mouth, the gums, the tongue, the teeth. I sense my jaw, trying to sense the skin, the muscles. And then the ears, sensing the left ear, all of the fleshy outer bits, and then the inner ear, then the right ear. And now I try to sense the whole of my head, the top, back, sides, forehead, face, ears. And I just briefly recheck my posture. Where am I? Am I tense here, tense there? Do I need to adjust a little? Shake things out a little. I now come into my neck. Can I sense the front of my neck? The back of the neck? The sides of the neck? I'm being pushed and pulled. Can I bring my attention back? Now sense the shoulders, all the musculature, as best I can, the skin, the joints. Try to sense the chest, the upper back, all of the skin, muscles, down through to the middle back and then lower back, and then around to the abdomen, the stomach. Can I soften my stomach? Trying to sense all of the skin. Sense this movement as I breathe, trying to stay with it. And I try to sense the upper arms as they hang by my sides. Then the elbows, then the lower arms, the wrist, and hands. Again, I just check my posture. Do I need to adjust? Something not quite there. And then I try to sense the sensations of the hips, how it makes contact with the chair, the evenness of weight on each side of the hips. Then into the thighs, a general sense of the skin, musculature. Then the knees, then the lower legs, ankles, and then the feet, particularly as the feet make contact with the ground. And then I just try to receive an impression of the whole of my body, from the top of the head all the way down to the toes, trying to take in as much as I can, but not forcing anything. And then I let that go. And I now place my attention into my right hand. I now try to sense the palm of the hand all of the skin, muscles, bones and joints if I can. The top of the hand. And then I try to sense all of the fingers and the thumb individually. Sensing from the tips all the way down till it approaches the hand, and then all the way back out again. The thumb and then each of the fingers. And also the webbing between the fingers. It's becoming a little harder. I'm being more pulled away. So I make this effort to return to the hand. Now I try to sense the wrist. And the whole of the lower arm, the back, the front, the sides, trying to connect with these sensations of the body. And I try to sense the elbow, the crux of the elbow. Then the upper arm, the front, the back, sides, and then into the shoulder. And then I come back down the arm, sensing the upper arm, the elbow, lower arm, wrist, and hand. I now try to sense the whole of my right arm, from the shoulder all the way to the tips of the fingers. Can I take in this impression? Where is my arm? I let that go. I get a sense of my posture. Do I need to adjust? I try to keep soft and passive, but I need to activate myself. No sleeping, no daydreaming, no fantasies, no shopping lists. I wish to stay with my body. Now I sense the whole of my right foot. Trying to sense the top of the foot, the bottom of the foot, the heel, then all the toes individually, up and down, and then the webbing between the toes. And then I try to sense my right ankle, skin, bones, joints. Then my right lower leg, trying to sense the front, the back, the sides, trying to connect to the sensations, the skin, muscles as far as I can. Then the knees, the right knee, the crux of the knee. And I try to sense my right thigh. the front, the back, sides, and then the hip, the right hip, trying to sense the pressure on the seat, all of the skin, all of this tingling or warmth, or just felt energy, whatever I perceive, but it's tangible. And then I move back down the right leg, hip, the thigh, sensing the knee, lower leg, ankle, foot. And I try to sense the whole of my right leg as one piece from the hip all the way through to the toes. And then I let that go. Again, I seek to adjust, ready for my next effort. I now pay attention to my left foot, the top of the foot, bottom of the foot, heel, then all of the toes individually, up and down, trying to sense them, trying to sense their place and their relationship with the rest of the other toes. Then the webbing, then I move to my ankle, the left ankle, skin, joints, then into the left lower leg, sensing the front, the back, the sides, all of the muscles, the skin, then the knee, the crux of the knee, and I move my attention into the left thigh. I stay with this, sensing the front, the back and sides of the thigh. If I wander, I come back. If I'm distracted, I come back. Then into the hip, the left hip, trying to sense the left hip on the seat, skin, muscles. And then I move back down the thigh to the left knee, left lower leg, ankle, foot. I now try to sense the whole of my left leg from the hip all the way down to the toes. I feel this effort. It is not easy to make. I then let that go and move into my left hand, to the top of the hand, to the palm, and then trying to sense all of the fingers and thumb up and down individually, Sensing the webbing, the whole of the hand, now I bring my attention into my left wrist. I now try to sense my left lower arm, the front, back, sides, all of the skin, muscles, bones, as best I can. And then I try to connect with the elbow and the crux of the elbow. And then the left upper arm, sensing the front, the back, the sides. And then the shoulder, all around, skin, muscles, joint. And then I move back down the left arm, upper arm, elbow, lower arm, hand. And I try to sense now the whole of my left arm, from the shoulder all the way through to the tips of the fingers. The whole of this arm as one piece, trying to include every sensation I can. And then I let that go. Maybe I need to adjust. I now bring my attention back to the top of the head. I find my posture, my softness, as relaxed as I possibly can, yet alert and aware of what is pushing and pulling me. And then I move my attention back down the body. The head, top, sides, back, front. Then the face, eyes, nose, mouth, jaw, ears. Then the neck, front, back, sides. Then the shoulders, chest, upper back, middle back, lower back, stomach, arms, elbows, lower arm, wrists, hands. Then the hips, thighs, knees, lower legs, ankles, feet. And I try to have a sense of the whole of my body, as much as I can, from the top of my head all the way down to the tips of the toes. A soft, supple, and relaxed, but in alert attention. And then I just gently let all of that go. And that exercise is 1/4 of what is called the preparation exercise. And something that we will return again and again to. But as an aim for this session, all the time that we're with each other, can I pay attention to my feet, the sensations of my feet as they connect to the ground, as I speak, and as I listen? Can I make that effort? It is an inner effort. No one's going to thank you. You're not going to get a reward for that. This is for you. Can I honor this aim, this intention? Have one part of my attention connected to my body, to my feet, and the other part engaged with whatever needs to be engaged with. And we will return to that. So inwardly affirm this to yourself, that this is your aim. Don't pass it off as something nice. Try it, really try it. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. It's good to see everyone. Thank you for being brave enough to come along. We won't do any intros. We've got everybody's names up on screen, and over the course, hopefully, of the next couple of weeks, we will get to know each other in a different way. So let's not have names and words create too many barriers for us. So I wanted to say right off the bat, I am not the teacher or a guru, as that might be known. I am simply someone who's been compelled to share, so share I must. And hopefully it might be of some value. And if it's not, okay, fair enough. So for this session, I have some materials which I'll share up on screen, but encourage lots of questions along the way. On the Hardway site, there were a number of links, which is just to my blog site, which is just some reference material which I will touch upon and expand. That blog site is an attempt to try to translate a little into more contemporary modes of thought some of the material that Gurdjieff brought quite some time ago. And really the key aim of this course and the sessions over the next couple of weeks is its emphasis on practice and being practical. Otherwise, the ideas that are being looked at here really go no further than just talking. So the exercises are key. The exercises are a doorway into the depth of what Mr. Gurdjieff was trying to bring. So before we move off, are there any questions that anyone might have if I haven't clarified anything or something that needs to be clarified. Otherwise, I'll assume silence is good. Okay. Andrew, I will now attempt to share. Okay, can everybody see my screen? All good? Okay, excellent. So this first session is probably one of the keys to the hard way. And it's kind of brutal. So I won't hold back. But it's something that was brought by Gurdjieff quite strongly, though he did try to present this in a number of different ways. But it's about a sleep and awakening. And probably the awakening bit is one of those things that's loaded with all sorts of meanings, and also the same with sleep, but I will attempt to try to clarify that a little. But again, as we go along, if there's any questions that anyone wants to ask, please feel free to ask, and anything that may need to be clarified. Okay. So this first question, what is sleep? What is this pillar of Gurdjieff's work, of the hard way? This is a very hard fact that Gurdjieff tried to convey. It's something that won't sit easy, even if you think it does, that we are all asleep, like everyone else. In particular, you are asleep. And as I alluded to, this is the hardest pill to swallow, and in my view, the biggest barrier. If I'm able to accept this fact that's put forward by Gurdjieff, most of your problems are solved when it comes to the other side of the coin in terms of awakening. So, shattering the first illusion. Gurdjieff goes to some pains at trying to instill that we are asleep. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the characteristics of what sleep means. But I need to emphasize it's very practical and we can verify it for ourselves. It just rubs up against us in a very strong way. So, how to shatter this first illusion that I feel as though I'm awake? And indeed, it's reinforced in us all the time that we're a conscious agent. It's in our law. In fact, the very heart of the legal system makes an assumption that everybody, at least when you turn a certain age, that you are conscious. So Gurdjieff would refute that. So why are you convinced that you are awake? Why are we convinced that we are awake? So one of the things that Gurdjieff would say is that there are moments in our life, during our day, during any period, when we're a little less asleep. There is something that has ever so slightly woken up in us, normally by some kind of external shock. You walk down the street and there's a car crash that you've been witness to that pushes you back into your body. It wakes you up a little bit. It taps you into the vital energies, the flight and fight. It might be something that you've seen on the internet or something that someone may have said to you. Just could be a word. It could be an impression. Might be a piece of music, a work of art. There will be potentially something that just enlivens you for a little bit. And it's those moments that we really remember. And so we, so to say, connect the dots. And even though there might only been a few of them during the day, because they're the ones that we remember because we're just a little bit awake at that point in time, we make an assumption that we are awake all the time. And what we don't see is the vast ocean between those moments of slightly being awake, where we are completely asleep, harrowingly so. That is, we're just not there. So this is this illusion. This illusion is moments of being a little bit more awake or a little bit less asleep, create the veneer that we're somehow conscious. And yet the vast majority of our everyday life is actually in this sleep-like state, what Gurdjieff early on called in his Russian period, a man-machine. The problem is with the first illusion is that you can't just talk about it. You can't just point it out to someone, because it's a very solid and also an illusion which is constantly reinforced, particularly in the modern world, where everything is about I, everything is about choice, everything is about control, everything is about trying to do all of these things because you're the master of your destiny. So to be told that that is not what it seems to be, that indeed that there is an illusion here, is often just rejected outright. So Gurdjieff said one of the tests of the hard way, of the fourth way, is whether there is an acceptance and effort to try to verify whether this is true or not. That effort reveals something about the person in question and whether they're even ready to attempt a way such as this. And part of this needing to see your own sleep is that you will also begin to see the sleep of others, and particularly of communities and nations, because you will begin to taste and to penetrate what that sleep means. And that is, and certainly my experience, painful. It's not an easy thing to bear, particularly when one begins to see, if I'm not as conscious as what I think I am, maybe there are others who I've vested as being conscious, maybe they are not either. And certainly my experience is that there seems to be, but I could be wrong, more and more people who begin to see this sleep, though it might be cast in a different word or a different language or framework. And without a more practiced insight around it, can often go mad. It can really vex you. Why is this? Particularly as one in our modern world gets brought up with this idea that we're conscious agents, that we're in control, that we have choice, to begin to see that maybe that is not correct at a fundamental level, and to begin to see that in others, like one's family, friends, people that one looks up to, and communities, nations, governments. This can be shattering. So this is interesting, something that Gurdjieff kind of predicted about 100 years ago, that with the globalist age and the greater content into the consciousness of the public, we would automatically be forced to see things that maybe we're not quite ready for. And this would be one of them. And in a sense, we can see it in the world today, the chaos that's happening. We pride ourselves on being so advanced, and yet we're still killing each other like it's going out of fashion. So it just brings this question, why? If we were really conscious, why is this all happening? If I was really conscious, why have I done the things that I have done? Why do I do the things that I do? So there's this initial question. What is this sleep? And as I alluded to a little bit earlier, one of the reasons why few people are attracted to the hard way is because that first pill is the hardest one to swallow. That doesn't mean that you need to swallow it holus bolus, but it means to maybe just bring it into question. Maybe I'm not as conscious as what I think. Can I find a way to verify that in practice? When this is brought to the majority of people, most people reject it outright. What a load of rubbish. Of course I'm conscious. I'm able to do this, I'm able to do that. I live a life, I've gone to university, gotten married maybe, kids, run businesses, part of the world. Of course I'm conscious. Of course. Well, we'll see. Is there anything anyone would like to comment on, share, or have a question about?
Yeah, you were just using the word conscious, which is one of those words like awakening that has lots of meanings. And I'm sure it has probably a deeper meaning in Gurdjieff's work. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious where we're going to go with consciousness, which I think you're presenting as the antonym to sleep.
Yes, and we will certainly talk about that a little more. And what is seen as consciousness, because it's very interesting when you use the word consciousness or awareness or attention, it all seems to get mushed. But Gurdjieff had quite a contained kind of definition. And just to maybe allude to that for you, Stephen, that he said our real consciousness is our subconsciousness. Our real consciousness is the consciousness we don't see, which is interesting because in the modern world, normally consciousness is something that I do see.
Right. Right.
And for Gurdjieff, this consciousness that we call consciousness is a flimsy something that pops its head up every now and again. You know, at a moment I'm a bit of awake and there's some consciousness that comes with it. And then I move back down into this subconscious landscape, which I'm just not aware of. And that's the odd thing. How do you talk about something that you're not even aware of? And as
Yeah.
soon as we put a name on it, as soon as we say subconsciousness, our mind automatically goes, ha, I know what that is. By definition, we don't. By
Yeah.
definition, it's not seen.
I see.
And so, in a way, the hard way is about seeing, is about acknowledging that this subconscious, this intelligence, and we can talk about that much more, this intelligence that is literally billions of years in the making, we're barely aware of. And one of those things that we're barely aware of is just the sensations of the body. The sensations of the body is an expression of that subconsciousness. And when we can connect to the sensations, we begin to connect with something that we're mostly never aware of, unless we've suffered injury or illness. And then our subconsciousness puts it in our face and says, hey, there's something going on here and you need to wake up a little. So it's, yes, what you raise is very interesting. And we'll try to define that more and more. So this notion of sleep, if you'd like, is when we're in an entirely subconscious state, or mostly a subconscious state. But we feel as though we're conscious because we have these little moments of something speaking to us from that vast ocean of subconsciousness that we're just not aware of. So for Gurdjieff, how do we engage directly with our subconsciousness? How do we help support that subconsciousness grow into our consciousness or our awareness and have it sustained there and not just bib and bob, not just come in and out? And so all of the practices that Gurdjieff brought has really one aim: to make what's currently unconscious conscious. But how do I do that? I can't just wish for it. If we could all just wish to be conscious, wow, it'd just happen. We'd all be enlightened beings and the world would be a very different place. So the exercises, in a sense, are about how do we bring what's underneath up, even if it's just for moments, and then begin to see it. And the one interesting property about consciousness, and I'm talking about real consciousness here, is once something is seen, it's never unseen. It's like witnessing a painting. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So little bits by little bit, we need to bring this subconsciousness into our everyday awareness, or what we call consciousness. And that is really difficult. And we'll talk about why that's the case, at least from Gurdjieff's perspective. but to have an appreciation that this subconsciousness is just very hard to tap into. But yet we need to, if we wish to see ourselves, see our functions, the way that we work, and see what's really underneath and not just make assumptions. Does that meet your question, Stephen?
Yeah, it answered my question and adds some additional curiosity I have. Thank you for your very responsive answer.
Good, good. Okay, let's move on. So just getting down a little bit more into the specifics, which is going to your question, Stephen. So what is sleep? A lack of a certain quality of energy that leads to an associative, reactive existence. They're Gurdjieff's words. In his early days, as I said, he used to call this becoming a man machine, just a reflexive organism. And this associative, reactive existence can be defined in many, many ways. And there's more than what I've said here. But because there's this lack of this quality of energy, and I want to emphasize quality of energy, it is a real, tangible thing. It is not in your head. It is an aspect of the universe like any other form of energy that leads to this associative, reactive, reflexive existence. And because of this lack of quality, Gurdjieff says, it will lead to all of these very strange things, which is part of our world. People talk about going through the motions, being on autopilot, living in a small part of themselves, fragmented, split, the multiple eyes that Gurdjieff spoke of in his earlier days, being absent. We talk about these things as quite a tangible, qualitative sense about really what it means to lack this quality of energy. And there is many more things that can go around that. But one of the things that it begins to do with this lack of quality is that whatever energy is there tends to shrink into only a few places. So Gurdjieff talks about some of these ego traps, identification, attachments, the behaviors we have, self-justification. I am always right, everyone else is always wrong. Because there is this lack of quality in me, and we'll talk about that a little further, this lack of quality, my functions can only function at a relatively low level. It's like putting bad fuel into a sports car. And so Gurdjieff says if we lack this quality, if we have a lower quality of energy in us, then none of our functions, thinking, feeling, the body, can work at an appropriate level. And indeed, it must devolve into something that can only use the coarseness of that quality that's available. And so in a sense, he recasts sleep as really an issue with energy and this quality of energy. It is also for him, this lack of quality, a true source of evil, in the sense that when I lack this quality, where I am contained in this reflexive state is in the lower parts of me, the parts that just want to preserve my sense of self, the parts that just are there to survive. And the ego, if you like, is a classic example of that. How much time do we spend pouring energy into our self-image? Maybe an image of how important I am, how smart I am, how attractive I am, how rich I am, how whatever. And the lengths that people go to keep reinforcing that self-image, even to killing one another over an image or a reputation. Which is what? So we move from something that potentially can awaken something in us to being dragged down into a very survival level function. And while we have that in the body, like fight or flight, we also have that in our inner world, which we would call the ego. This self-image, though helpful to adapt, to engage in the culture at the time, but the ego's purpose is to preserve you. It's to keep that image so you have some instrument with which to engage in the world, at least at a survival level. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay. So I've said something in passing here. There are massive external forces keeping us all in relative sleep. Gurdjieff says a great deal about this. In fact, many religions and many spiritual pathways also talk a great deal about it. It's normally framed in a very different way. But for Gurdjieff, these massive external forces are law conformable. Nature, our planet, indeed our solar system, needs to keep the majority of us asleep. It needs to keep things functioning in an automated way. And there are various reasons that Gurdjieff talks about why in the evolution of our planet that's the case. It wasn't always the case, according to him. But now it is. So what does this mean? It means that our sleep is not our fault. We don't have to beat ourselves up over it. It's not a punishment. It is a natural law that, at least unfortunately at this period of history, most of our human species needs to be kept in an automated state. But unfortunately, we are held accountable because of the potential for free will. And Gurdjieff has his own sense of what that is, very much in line with the biblical accounts of the human species falling. Where those accounts tend to differ, the biblical ones is where the devil tempts Adam and Eve. For Gurdjieff, it's where there has been a miscalculation by beings of a much higher order in relation to our planet. And now we are suffering the unfortunate consequences of that. So we've got to deal with what we've got rather than labour on what we haven't. But this is important. This sleep, he says, is not a result of something in our character or personality. It is something that is imbued in our nature from forces outside of us. It is not all in your head. It is not a mental illness. It is law conformable. And because of our potential for free will, it puts us into a bit of a strange position that while we are mostly asleep, we can awaken. Welcome to being human. So for the most part, our imagination, uncontrolled, that generally we would talk about as the daydreams, the constant think talk that we have, the associations that are flying around in our heads, create non-reality for us. This is partly to do with sleep confining us. So the exercise that we tried about being able to attempt to connect with the body is a way of being able to get out of our heads. When we are confined to one part of ourselves, and it could be the thinking or the feeling or the body, then we have a very lopsided view of the world, and it's a lopsided view which is perceived in sleep. So the more that we are in one part of ourselves, and particularly for the modern world, which is very cerebral focused, and this has only come about in probably the last couple of 100 years, and more so the last 50, and particularly the last 20 or 30, where everything is forcing you into your head. And we are taught that we need to think our way out of everything. That is tragic. Because the more we rely upon thinking, the more we become less reliant upon the other parts of ourselves, our states of feeling, states of being, our body that can be enlisted to help us awaken. It is the reason why that intellectuals today are most at risk of being in sleep, because it is assumed that thinking is consciousness. Just because you think, according to Gurdjieff, does not mean you're conscious. Thinking is like feeling, is like sensation, is like any other function of us. It happens. If it's unrelated or unconnected, it just happens in sleep. But because we're using our thinking center a great deal, we assume that it's the center of the universe. And so if we think, we must be conscious. Gurdjieff would say that that is a lot of poppycock. I would agree. That doesn't mean that thinking is bad. On the contrary, it can serve a very high purpose. But if it's not related to the other parts of us, then it does some quite terrible things. And one of the things that the thinking center does, if it's not connected to the rest of us, is that it can logic out anything. Anything goes, anything is justified, anything is rationalized. And that normally leads to all sorts of horrors. And I'm sure we can all name plenty of examples, even in recent history, the last 100 years, where the logic of certain things, while logical, has led to terrible events. So that's probably one of the things that I want to emphasize. Thinking is not consciousness. but we believe we are conscious because we think a lot. So one of the ways we can begin to look at this energy, if you'd like, this quality of energy and our sleep is looking at our normal sleep, organic sleep. This is a very interesting line of work because it gives insights into a number of things: consciousness, subconsciousness, even death. It's a little slice, and we do it every day. And yet most people pay no attention to it. Oh, it's just sleep. Yes, we go to sleep, we wake up. The question is, what takes you into sleep? And then what awakens you from it? So an exercise that you can try when you go to sleep tonight is allowing yourself to go off to sleep, but watching as far as you possibly can how the energies withdraw into the subconscious regions. Let me state that again. How the energies withdraw, because they withdraw. I move from this active state into a passive state and then into something else. When I awaken, and let me emphasize, really it's when something is awakened in me to come out of my slumber, there is a return, an entry of that energy. This can give very good insight into sleep. Not only my normal sleep, but how I sleep during the day. And it's very much related to this quality of energy and the spectrum of it. You can literally see people go to sleep in themselves. You've probably seen it when you've spoken to someone. One obvious sign is when someone's eyes glaze over. That glazing over is the ocular muscles relaxing because they've moved from being engaged with something external. Something withdraws, their attention withdraws, this energy withdraws, and they go back inwards, and you see it in their eyes. If you stick with it long enough, you'll see it in their face. The jaw will drop, or they'll slump, something like that. If you've noticed when people might be a little drunk and they somehow sober up, what happens? Something is awakened in them, and how quickly one can sober up, literally. So there's some very interesting observations that can take place, this energy withdrawal and its entry, but it's quick. And I need to see it in myself first, and then you will see it in others. You can't not see it in others. In fact, Gurdjieff said that this was a law. What you see in yourself is what you will see in others. So I need to see my sleep. So what's this withdrawal and entry? Interesting. There's also with sleep, apart from this withdrawal and entry, is also what happens to the body. What happens to my feeling, emotive, reactive states, and also what happens with the intellect, with what we would call the mind. So it's interesting that in order to go off to sleep, you need to put the body into a passive state. And then when you reawaken, the body is the last thing that tends to awaken itself and move around. Normally there's the first flash in the intellect, then maybe a feeling, maybe a body. But just to try to see this for oneself. So just offer that as a task when you go off to sleep. Can you just see how the energy withdraws in you and how it comes out of you? Any questions on that? That has popped up. Andrew.
Yeah, it seems to me that the way you're defining sleep is like an automated state. Like sleep can also be very aggressive, right? So when people are making war, for example, or that it's not necessarily related to rest. So it's almost like there's a paradox in how you're talking about it, because sleep seems to me like a restless state. It's not it's not a calm state, or it's not a present state, or it's not a restful state. It's a restless state. So it's almost like what we think of as being awake. So that was just kind of an observation. And so I'm also wondering about the difference between sleep and rest.
Yes. And they're good points, because we can be conscious of our automation. We can be automatic, yet still very conscious. So this is the difficulty with approaching this, is that this sleep function, or this aspect of sleep, in a sense, is just what we see or what we're aware of. And you're quite right, we can be very active. Gurdjieff says we can write volumes of books and have wars and do all sorts of things, but it's all done in sleep. It's all done in a reactive and an automatic way. And yet we do have that sense that there is something resting in us. There is something passive in us when we sleep. And that's this relationship to this subconscious, that I'm not connected to my subconscious. So there's a part of me which is passive. Things just happen. Things can still happen, but am I conscious of it? So it's often, for example, if I want to take a drink of this glass of water, I don't want to impede my functions. My body is far more intelligent than what I am to be able to grab that glass of water and put it to my mouth. My body is far more intelligent in terms of where the water needs to go and how it needs to move through me, but I can be conscious of what's happening at every step of the way. My body can do exactly the same thing, and I can just be not conscious of it. So when Gurdjieff talks of sleep, when he talks of this man-machine, he talks of this energy level, it means that there's something missing from us. There's this element of seeing which is somehow not in the foreground. It's kind of buried, and I'm just an automaton, good, bad, or otherwise.
I'm just a little confused about like what the awakened state would be. Would that mean that everything we do is entirely conscious? I mean, are we going to be thinking about our stomach and every movement we make? And because I don't think that's it either, right?
So maybe as a practical example, the exercise that we tried, the preparation exercise. I don't know what it was like for you, but for me, when I initially start the exercise, it's hard. It's like my attention needs to be activating in some way to to connect with the sensations. And then I can connect more with the sensations as I go along. And then at some point, it is these sensations that awaken me. It is the sensations that engage with my attention. And this is something very interesting. For Gurdjieff, and certainly my experience, this awakening state doesn't come from the head. It doesn't come from the intellect. It comes from the vital energies of the body. It's like, for example, when one is injured or has illness where there's pain, and this pain is constantly alerting you to something. You're constantly conscious of it. It's like that, but in a different way, in a subtle way, in a way that just says, I'm here in the background. I'm just here, and at any moment, if you need to pay some attention to it, it's there. Something has been activated, but it doesn't mess with my everyday attention. Where we seem to, and this is, I think, certainly true for Gurdjieff, is when we mistake thinking for consciousness or awakening, which means we're constantly thinking about awakening and consciousness. And we kind of get ourselves tied up in knots, where for Gurdjieff, the awakening process comes from the body, or should I say, what we perceive to be the body, or the energies that animate the body. That awakening then awakens other things in us, such as feeling and the intellect. So this is a very interesting change that we need to make, and only through practice is need to see that our awakening, while it might be supported by the head or feelings, really doesn't originate from it. It originates from something much deeper. And we can talk about that a little further. But maybe before we move on to the next slide, does anyone just need a 5-minute break just to maybe move, because we've been sitting for a little while?
Yeah,
Okay.
good idea. I'd like to stand up.
So before we do, spend a couple of minutes moving, doing whatever that you need, but can I persist with the original exercise and try to connect with the sensations of my feet? Let's just try that, and let's meet back here in a couple of minutes or so. So this was a nice segue from what Andrew raised a few moments ago. So what is awakening? Just touched on it, this influx of a certain quality of energy. This is important here, an influx of a certain quality of energy, and we've all experienced this in some way, shape, or form. It's normally what gives the essence of being spiritual, that there's a quality there that enlivens me, that increases this connection and relationship I have with others. You know, these are some of the hallmarks of those energies. Presence, clarity, these different states of being, but we're normally only in them for fleeting moments. We can't sustain it. And I'm not talking about higher states in the sense that we sometimes mean that, but in states where I'm still lucid, still every day, but yet there's something in me that's just a little bit more there. And in these states, if I can notice this, and only in these states, can I see things in a different way. Perhaps I'm not the center of the universe. Perhaps my problems are not as big as what I think. And also the capacity to begin to take myself out of the equation, but to recognize that it is the quality of energy that permits these things. It also, in these better states, if I can say that, I can begin to come to something through raw experience rather than just through fashionable concepts, because I have something very tangible in me that I can relate to. So one of those things is sleep. I see how I am asleep. I see my energies withdrawing. Can't always see it, and then I go into this sleep-like state. And then at other moments, I'm a little bit more awakened, but I can begin to see how my energies move. So when I got up a few moments ago to take a bit of a break, did I remember to connect with my feet? Or did I just hop up and go? Was it that my body moved me because it needed to move? Was I able to bring some presence to it? Or if not, what prevented me from doing that? When I begin to base this off experience, when I begin to see the energies and forces that move through me, and I see them as energies and forces, I can begin to see when things are more aligned, when things are not. You may have had that experience when one's all in one's head, all the energy is there, I can get a headache. I'm not aware of my body, or I feel numb, as opposed to maybe I have a glass of whiskey and all of a sudden I'm feeling pretty good. Body's a bit more relaxed, a bit less in my head. Why is that? Yes, the alcohol would have catalyzed something, but it's really there was a change of the energy, a direction. And often this is what is brought into the exercises as a means to see this. Also, the interesting thing generally about this quality of energy when it's there, one's wants tends to subside. I seek less to be stimulated by the outside world and more content with just being here, with just being present. I'm sure we've all had that experience for no reason whatsoever. I'm just content with just being here. Where normally there is something in me which needs to gratify itself, which needs to conquer something, do something, engage with something. And that's fine. It's legitimate. But it's just to give this sense that this awakening process is, at least according to Gurdjieff and certainly my own experience, while one can gain insights from those things, it's not like one is suddenly enlightened and knows everything. It comes at these bits at a time. I begin to awaken, I see something, I drop back into sleep. Then I need to find a way to come out of that, knowing I will drop back into sleep. And so most of my consciousness is moving like this until I can begin to understand how to sustain it. And this is really the core of Gurdjieff's work. is these awakened states or awakening states are good, but they are only useful if you can sustain them. You can do lots of drugs, do lots of spiritual techniques that will get you there, absolutely. And it's probably good to try them. But can you stay there? Can you stay there in the midst of life? This is where we need to see things. So another hard fact, awakening is difficult. Awakening is very difficult, mainly because of all these forces which are trying to keep us asleep, and they're asleep themselves. One of these things that Gurdjieff talks about is our attention constantly being consumed, constantly being ripped out of us, constantly being attracted. That energy literally is pulled out of our bodies and goes somewhere. We've got it down to a reasonably fine art in the modern world. It's called the marketing and advertising industry. Not saying it's bad, I'm just saying that its role is to consume, to eat your attention, which is fine, but that leaves you relatively empty. And again, with the awakening, if awakening was easy, if it could be done in some simple steps, or read a book, or be part of some group, or whatever it is, the world would be a different place, a very different place. And that's not to say that it's not moving to a different place, but it's to say it would be a very different place. Very much like sleep, you must see your own awakening, and particularly the conditions that allow it to come about. So we've already mentioned a couple of ways of just looking at, for example, when I go off to sleep at night, can I just see if I can follow the thread of how my energy withdraws? That will give you a wealth of material about the sleeping process, both in the organic sense, but also in the sleep sense, as well as the awakening process itself. When we worked with the preparation exercise and even trying to connect with our feet all the way through this session, it will give material for what are the conditions that I need to awaken. And it's not always when it's nice and quiet and things are still. So I have all this material here that I can study. What was it about beginning this process of connection and activating my attention? Only you can see that, and you need to understand that. The difficulty, this is the hard bit, is to try to sustain it with a bit of discipline and conviction, despite almost constant failure. Awakening, or some process of awakening, often comes by itself in the beginning because the conditions sort of are naturally aligned, as well as some other things. But to begin to try to bring this into life and to sustain it with a discipline. The hard part is that I will see again and again and again just how hard it is. And yet I must persist. And there's a good reason why persistence is critical. because it will develop something in you. And we can talk about that maybe at the next session. But I just wanted to emphasize that awakening, only you can understand it for yourself. After general principles, it's really up to you. The other hard fact is you can't do it alone. This is one of the things that is a paradox, in the sense that only you can do it. Only you need to see and understand what your own sleep and awakening processes are. But yet at the same time, you can't do it on your own. So this is where it becomes very interesting in terms of, let's just call them spiritual groups or networks or communities. One of the purposes, and this is one of the purposes of this course, is that for a limited period of time, if we're all working with a more conscious effort with the exercises and aims, it will by itself create the energy that we need to tap into. So groups, in the sense of the hard way, in the sense of the Gurdjieff work, has really nothing to do with the outside, nothing so much to do with the structure. It's got everything to do with the inner effort. If we are all working inwardly, at least for a certain period, on something, something becomes accumulated, and those who are participating, and even those who aren't, but are connected in a different way, will be able to tap into that reservoir of energy. Now, I know that that might be a hard concept to take in. Nevertheless, it is so. But we can see this in many other areas of life. Go to a sporting event, go to a live concert, where people tap into the atmosphere. People tap into the energy of the situation. It's not always conscious. It's normally of a different category of energy, but yet we all recognize that we can sip at its well. So groups and networks and collaboration has everything to do with what's going on inwardly and less to do with what's going on outwardly. However, what we find in the world is a focus on the outward and an assumption that if we take care of the outward, that the inward will correspond. This is seldom the case, certainly in my experience. So it is the inward that becomes important. What are we trying? What are we attempting? What's the inner exercise here? That's front and center. And in a world where we are constantly pulled out of ourselves, it creates an increased kind of difficulty, because we need to find ways to remember to come back in. So, what is this quality of energy needed and how to acquire it? We've already mentioned some aspects, and there's a lot in it, but I'll just touch on it. For Gurdjieff, and at least in our modern world, is everything to do with attention. He's quoted it, "We need all our attention to study all of our attention." When we don't have attention, we literally don't exist, because we're not aware of anything. This attention, if I go back to more of the ancient language, is associated very much with will and how that is normally construed. We can talk about that more in the next session. We talked a little bit earlier about attention versus consciousness versus awareness, and we talked about the subconscious. I find an example of how to think about this, if you'd like, is there's an old Persian saying that attention is the oil in the lamp of consciousness. So without attention, without oil, there's no light. And my attention, which I can focus via will, or it is focused for me by something else's will, can be directed. This is one of the most important faculties, and I would dare say the most important faculty of a human. It is the only thing that we potentially have any control over. And so when I begin to exercise and I begin to see my sleep, it will become clearer what's within the sphere of my control and really what's not. But again, I need to see that for myself. But attention, which literally means to collect one's energies, to coalesce something inward so I can then use it outwardly, is the key. Again, we can talk about that a great deal more. So what we've just tried in the preparation exercise as a beginning is we need to allow this attention to envelop us, to strengthen our intention, to make it more embracive, inclusive. We need to bring the body into it so that the feelings and the thoughts can be encompassed with what Gurdjieff called our common presence. So we connect with the sensations of the body, which is not the body, but those vital energies which are connected to the body. So there's this active attention directly. I don't think about it in a sense. I just direct my attention into my body. If this, as you like, creates a potential container, a field of action, and rather than my attention being confined mostly to my head, it can expand and include more and more. The interesting part about including more and more of the attention with the body is that it will elicit higher, whole, or more collected states of being. This is something I need to confirm and verify for myself. But if we go back to the preparation exercise, I'm sure that we were very different at the end than we were at the beginning. What's changed? Probably many things, but one of the things is my state. State is a very interesting word, and we can talk about that more next week. This is something that I have found important if I want to think in a different way, to feel in a different way, and I need to be different. There is something in my being that needs to change to allow another feeling and another thinking. You may have recognized in your own experience the flashes of insight or some problem that you've had, and that it suddenly comes to you. More often than not, if you've been aware of it, that there has been some change in your state. So in a way, this modern culture of thinking our way out of everything is a bit topsy-turvy. In the Gurdjieff work, in this hard way, I need to begin to understand that in order to think in a new way, I need to feel in a new way. I need to be in a new way, and not the other way around. As I alluded to, these more sustained states of being, where I am more connected, more collected, more embracive, these energies, particularly through this awakening process, allows for what Gurdjieff calls the growth, at least of the middle part of the soul. It's able to crystallize something. My attention can envelop more of me, and while at the same time tap into all of those subconscious energies and intelligences, which I'm normally completely unaware of. If you'd like, one brings something from one world into this one. And Gurdjieff literally talks about the soul being born in embryo. So we're bringing this consciousness or this subconsciousness, which is we're not aware of, we're trying to birth it in ourselves into this world. And the midwife is our attention. Okay. So I will task you all. I've probably harped on a great deal about this preparation exercise, or the 1 quarter, this starting from the head, sensing the body all the way through its various parts, then sensing all of the right arm and back down with a whole sense, then the right leg up and down, whole sense, then left leg, then left arm, and then finishing with a whole sense. If we can practice this in the morning, we give ourselves this time, we honor that time and try to do it as best as we possibly can. If we're all trying that, it will be very interesting to see what gets shared next week. After one completes that preparation exercise in the morning, to set an aim for oneself, to pay attention to the sensations of the hand when opening doors during the day. Just a very simple task. Can I pay attention to the sensations of my hand as I'm opening a door? That's it. Don't have to analyze it. I just try it. And when I'm reading, and hopefully we'll be reading, can I try to remember to pay to the sensations of the feet, like what we've been trying through this whole session. When I'm reading a book, can I pay attention and engage with the book while also paying attention to my feet? I'm trying to bring more of myself into the equation. It's not just an intellectual exercise. I bring my body into it. And when I try these exercises, the preparation exercise, the sensing the hand with doors and sensing the feet while reading, it's important I just report and observe. Don't analyze, don't judge, don't name. Just describe. Can I describe? So rather than saying I'm angry, which automatically means I am angry, I've identified with this thing I've named as anger, can I describe its taste, its smell, color maybe? Can I have a sense of where it flowed in me in the body? Was it in my chest, in my stomach? Was it in my neck? Where was this experience? And there's a very important reason, at least initially, not to name, not to analyze, and just describe. And again, we can talk about that next week. And next week, hopefully we've been working with these exercises. We can have an opportunity just to exchange a little. That is, maybe share something. There's no compulsion to, there's no obligation to. But just if you've seen something, and that could be really helpful for everyone. But until then, I wish you well in your work, you brave souls, and hope that it is fruitful for you. And Andrew, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about the Mighty Networks. It's a great platform. If people have any questions or want to share anything along the way, please do. But this session is, if you'd say, the first note that will help support the following two sessions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just wanted to say I'm going to put this video up on the networks, so people can perhaps. I don't know if Luke would suggest that we listen to the first exercise as a guided meditation, or just try to do it on our own. But in any case, the video would be available.
Great.
And you're welcome, to explore the Mighty Network site, and also unsubscribe. I don't want to have a compulsion for anybody to be there, but we're very happy to warmly invite you to the Parallax Networks. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Lovely to see you all, and blessings.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Luke.